All right, kiddos, so today we need to discuss water. Water is essential for life. All living things depend on water. Without water, there is absolutely no life. As you will see, water is also chemically unique. No other substance on Earth compares to water's abilities, properties, and characteristics. Water is essential for life. I will say it again, water is essential for life. Without water, there is no life at all. All living things depend on water. So whether you're a plant or an animal or a fungus, you depend on water. And the reason we depend on water is because all of the chemical reactions that take place in our bodies, whether you're a plant or an animal, all the chemical reactions that take place in the aqueous, watery environment of the cell. Right? We're made up of trillions of cells, but there are also single-cell organisms. But all of those cells are made up of water. There's water in every cell because that's where all the chemical reactions that take place in our bodies happen. Okay, so we're going to discuss today the unique characteristics of water. Living things are composed mostly of water. You can see here a picture of a cell. Every cell of a living thing, whether you're a plant or an animal, is like a water-filled factory. You can see all the different parts of the cell. There's an endoplasmic reticulum, these little green lines. There are parts called organelles inside every cell, but all of those parts are floating around in the aqueous, watery environment of the cell. Water's polar. Okay, water is a polar molecule. You can see, right, water is H2O. Even your little brother probably knows that the chemical formula for water is H2O. 2 hydrogen atoms, right, tiny little hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom. Now, oxygen atoms are a lot bigger. Okay, you can see here, oxygen atoms are a lot bigger than the 2 tiny little hydrogen atoms. Oxygen atoms also have more electrons than hydrogen atoms. Because the oxygen atoms, right, are bigger, they're more electronegative, which means that all of these electrons, right, that typically hang out around oxygen, and these electrons here, this electron here, and this electron here that typically hangs out with hydrogen, the oxygen is going to draw in those electrons. So what ends up happening is most of the electrons will hang out closer to the oxygen atom, and they'll be drawn away from the hydrogen atom. Now remember, electrons are negatively charged. So if all of the electrons are hanging out closer to the oxygen, that means this side of the molecule here is going to be more negatively charged. And if all of the electrons are pulled away from the hydrogens, right, all of these little blue dots, all of these negatively charged electrons are going to hang out closer to the oxygen. So that makes the oxygen side of the molecule more negatively charged, and it makes the hydrogen side of the molecule more positively charged. So if you were to draw a line right down the middle here, this side of the molecule would be more positively charged, and this side would be more negatively charged. And then you can see this model of water right here. This is called a space filling model, and it's showing that the hydrogen side of the molecule is more positively charged, and the oxygen side of the molecule is more negatively charged. So here's that same picture. I just wanted to show it to you a little bit bigger. Oxygen has 6 valence electrons on the outside, on its outer shell. Hydrogen only has 1. So if I were to count these up, you'd see oxygen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons in its outer shell. This electron here belongs to the hydrogen. This electron here belongs to this hydrogen. And what they end up doing is sharing. So there's a covalent bond here between this hydrogen and this oxygen. And there's a covalent bond here between this hydrogen and this oxygen. They're sharing a pair of electrons. And you can see this pair right here. This electron and this electron are a shared pair. And this electron and this electron are a shared pair of electrons. So the cool thing about water, because the hydrogen side of the water molecule is positively charged, and the negative side of the the oxygen side of the water molecule is negatively charged, when a water molecule comes in contact with another water molecule, when they meet up, they will bond positive to negative, positive to negative. So you can see the positive side of this water molecule is attracted to the negative side of this water molecule. And the negative side here of this water molecule is attracted to the positive side of this one. The negative side is attracted to the positive side of this one. The negative side of this one is attracted to the positive. The positive is attracted to the negative. And so these dashed lines represent something called a hydrogen bond. And it's these hydrogen bonds that connect water molecules to each other. The hydrogen bond are responsible for all of the unique properties of water. One of the coolest things about water is water actually expands when it freezes. Most molecules and compounds, when they freeze, you're taking the energy out of them. They're getting colder, they're slowing down, so they actually get closer together. But water molecules, when they freeze, they actually expand. So that's one of the cool, unique properties of water. But again, one water molecule is connected to another via this thing we call a hydrogen bond. The hydrogen bond is just the attraction of the negative side of one water molecule to the positive side of another molecule. And it is these hydrogen bonds that are responsible for the unique characteristics of water. Hydrogen bonding, that dashed line you saw in the last picture, causes something called cohesion and adhesion. Cohesion is the tendency of water molecules to stick to each other. In other words, water sticks to water. You don't think of water as sticky, but when two water molecules get close to each other, they stick together. They stick together because of this positive, right? This positive to negative attraction. Okay, so cohesion is partially charged water molecules pulled towards each other, creating a smooth, rounded shape. So when you see water droplets, right, that is due to cohesion. It's the tendency of water molecules to stick to each other. Adhesion is the tendency of water molecules to stick to the molecules of another substance. Okay, so water sticks to a different molecule. Water molecules are attracted to any substance with an electrical charge. Remember, one side of the water molecule is positive, one side is negative. So even if some other molecules come in here that aren't water, right, if they have a positive side and a negative side, if they are polar, right, they have poles, positive and negative, they'll line up positive to negative, positive to negative. So again, cohesion is the tendency of water molecules to stick to each other. It's just something you're going to have to memorize. Adhesion is the tendency of water molecules to stick to other electrically charged molecules. So you can see in this picture, you can see the rounded form of the water droplets. That is due to cohesion, the water molecules sticking to each other. And you can see the water droplets, right? The water droplets sticking to this, I guess, maybe it's a bamboo shoot. I don't know. A branch, we'll call it a branch. So the water molecules are rounded due to cohesion, the water molecules sticking together. But they're also stuck to or sticking to this branch, right? Because of adhesion. Okay, so water molecules are sticky. Water surface tension is a result of cohesion. When a molecule of water is surrounded by other water molecules, it is equally pulled in all directions by the hydrogen bonds between the molecules. But water molecules on the surface have no water molecules above them, so they are attracted only to the molecules next to them and below them. This gives the bonds of the top layer of water, of molecules, a particular strength. And notice I cited my source, right? I put quotes around it and I wrote lesson 2.07, the title of the lesson, and the page number where I found this information. Okay, this is a water, it's a bug, right? And it's sitting on top of the water. So water surface tension is due to the hydrogen bonding of water. But what's cool is when you're dealing with surface tension, right, here's a little water strider sitting on top of the water. You have these water molecules and they're attracted to the water molecules next to them. They're attracted to the water molecules below them, but there are no water molecules above them, right? Because it's just air. And so it allows for this thing called surface tension to form, which is a particularly strong, I think we said it in the last slide, right? This bond gives the top layer of molecules a particular strength that we call surface tension. And here's just another picture of surface tension. Remember, water surface tension is a result of cohesion, the ability of water molecules to stick to each other. You can see here's the surface of the water, right? The water molecules at the surface are only attracted to the water molecules next to them and below them. And this attraction of the water molecules next to each other, but nothing up here, provides for surface tension. So let's use the idea of adhesion and cohesion to talk about water movement in plants. And this water movement in plants is called capillary action. You guys all know that plants have roots, and water is absorbed by the roots and moves up through the plant, right? And then through the leaves, and then water is lost out through the leaves. Well, this capillary action, this movement of the water in the plants, is a result of cohesion of water and adhesion of that water to the solid material around it. As plants release water from their leaves, called transpiration, a void is created. To fill that void, water is drawn upward into the plant due to its attraction to the walls of the xylem tubes within the stem. Xylem is just a fancy word for the tubes within the stem of the plant that the water moves up. Think celery, right? You put celery in a glass of water and you know that it absorbs the water. The water moves up through the tubes. We call that the xylem tubes of the plant. So what does capillary action look like on a molecular level? Well, you can see we have some water molecules flowing through the xylem tubes of the plant, right? And due to adhesion, the water molecules will stick to the sides of the cell walls of the plant. Cohesion sticks water molecules to each other. So as one water molecule moves up the walls of the plant, the xylem tube of the plant, right? As one water molecule moves up, it drags the rest of the water molecules with it, kind of like a chain, because through cohesion they're stuck to each other. It's able to move up the walls because it's stuck to the wall. Okay, it's sticky and it adheres to the wall of the plant, and as the plant releases water molecules out the top, it draws water molecules in from the bottom. Adhesion and capillary action are the reasons you read the meniscus when measuring the volume of a liquid. If you've ever noticed you put liquid in a tall cylinder, it'll kind of curve right here. We call that the meniscus. The water is adhering to the sides of the cylinder, to the glass, and you can see it's kind of blown up here and then blown up even further here. The water is adhering to the sides of the cylinder, and so it's that adhesion that causes the capillary action, and then if you are reading a measurement, you actually read the bottom of the meniscus. This curvature right here is called the meniscus, and if you were taking your measurement, you would read right here where the bottom of the meniscus is. Water is also called the universal solvent. It dissolves things, right? You all know that if you put salt in water and stir it up, the salt will dissolve. Okay, so the solvent is the water. The solute is the material that's being dissolved. So in this case, it would be the salt. Or if you put sugar in water and stir it up, it dissolves. Okay, you know it's still there. If you tasted it, you can't see it, right? You can't see the salt, but if you tasted it, the water would taste salty. So water is known as a universal solvent. It's the material that causes another to dissolve, and the solute is the actual material that dissolved. So water would be the solvent, and for example, salt would be the solute. Because of its polar nature, water can dissolve many materials extremely effectively and is therefore dubbed nature's universal solvent. Water dissolves more types of solutes than any other substance on Earth. And again, I quoted it. I liked how it was worded in the lesson, so I used it and I cited my source, lesson 2.07, and I gave the page number. The cellular environment, remember we talked about cells earlier. We are made up of trillions of cells, and all of those cells are filled with water. So without water, there's no cells. Without cells, there's no us. All of the chemical reactions that take place in your body happen within the aqueous environment of the cell. Aqueous or aqueous, you can pronounce it either way, is just another fancy word for watery. Okay, so an aqueous or aqueous environment is a watery environment. All cells are aqueous. So yes, you can see the organelles, the pieces of the cell, the machinery of the cell that does all the chemical reactions, right? But all of those things are floating around in water. Water is so important that the cells of living things must maintain certain levels of water at all times. The cells of a plant store excess water in a structure called a central vacuole. The single-cell paramecium, which lives in water, has a contractile vacuole that can remove excess water, and the desert-dwelling kangaroo rat can go months without drinking water. Again, water is so important that cells of living things must maintain certain levels of water at all times. Cells are aqueous environments. All of the chemical reactions that take place in your body, in a plant's body, happen within the aqueous environment of the cell. And that goes back to this picture here. All of the chemicals that are in our body that are able to react with each other, to do all the chemical reactions that are happening all the time to keep us alive, are most of them, I shouldn't say all, most of them are salts. And when these salts dissolve, if you separate those ions like table salts, sodium and chloride, if you separate those ions and now they're all floating around in an aqueous environment, that gives them the ability to mix together, to react, to do those chemical reactions that keep us alive. But again, the cellular environment is aqueous or aqueous, which means it's a watery environment, and this is where all of the chemical reactions happen that support life. This is just a concept map from the lesson. Just to read it as in sentence form, you would say something like, water is a universal solvent because of its polar nature, which allows for cohesion and adhesion. Second sentence, water forms an aqueous environment that is the basis for all cell chemical processes.